Hello.
Hello. Yeah, but we can all hear you, so now.
Okay, guys, we are live now, right now. Good luck.
Okay. Wonderful. So I would like to welcome everyone on our little, well, maybe not little, actually really important meeting, our webinar, which is basically about women organising and treating women's empowerment as a way for political changes, and as the title of our webinar says, basically as a way to freedom. So what we are doing is that we have invited loads of wonderful activists and organisers who are here to fight for women's rights, who are here to fight for human rights, who are here to fight for general political emancipation. So I'm really thankful to host all of you. It's a great pleasure. My name is Adrianna Radłowska, and I'm representing the Red Youth of the Polish Socialist Party. And I'm going alongside with Kaya, who's from the same organisation, conduct today's interviews. So the way I'm going to do it is that we'll have each guest having their turn during the interview, and then there is going to be the time when I present them. And yes, and well, another thing that I need to mention is that this interview is going to be translated into Polish. So right now we're live and we are in English, but later we'll upload subtitles so that it's more accessible to other Poles who are watching us, because I know that there's quite a number of Polish people watching us as well and wanting to drive some interesting information from that experience that our guests are going to be sharing. So our first guest is Natalia Gebert from an organization called Dom Otwarty, which is dealing with the situation of the refugees. And my first question connected with this sole case is that, well, we've been talking about this for quite a long time, especially since the biggest crisis in 2013. But from your experience, has the situation and the public opinion changed much since then? Can you see any progress? Can you see people being more open to these sorts of problems?
Thank you, Adriana. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Well, looking at your question from my Polish corner, which is where I work, after terrible moral panic that followed situation in 2015, combined with approaching elections that made the topic of refugees a very fertile political fuel. It is slowly improving, very slowly, but if you look at the public opinion polls, it is changing to the better. It's still far from the pre-2015 level, but there is still hope. This being said, if you look at the greater picture, I get the impression that the EU as a whole and its respective members decided that securitization is absolutely the way to go, meaning closing our borders at all costs. We had recent reports about pushback in Greece, in Croatia. I could speak for hours about pushbacks on our own border. And everywhere it's being justified by threat to security. And the most recent proposal from the European Commission, which is the new pact for migration and asylum, the highest emphasis goes to returning people as fast as possible, whether they have actually access to just procedure or not. So while societal attitudes are improving, at least in my corner of Europe, institutional are getting worse.
Okay, I think that is really, really interesting, but also, well, quite dangerous tendency. So, in general, you would say that the society is much more welcoming now. So, the question is, why would you think that these attitudes have changed in the society itself?
Well, again, I can only speak from what I see in my own Polish backyard, which is a lot of work done by various civil society actors, not only NGOs, but influencers or well-known people who spoke for refugees, who invited refugees to live with them, who hired them. And I believe there might be also a grain of well, solidarity in difficult time of COVID-19 pandemics, where we all suffer equally, whether we've been born here or not. So that's why I'm hopeful, because if my observation are true, it means it should be a stable growth, maybe not very high, but the foundation seems solid.
So, from what I understand, you're also talking about people getting more and more involved, and helping out and reaching out the refugees. So, if one wants to, start organizing and actually helping people, if they want to help people seek asylum, then what can they do?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a private sponsorship mechanism in Europe, which would be a great help. But the very basic thing you can do is to organize some material aid, clothes, hygiene items, household items, school supplies for kids, and so on. But before you do that, make sure you have someone who would distribute those for you, and that you are actually collecting things that are really needed. So talk to your local NGO, talk to someone you might know who has contact with the refugee community or migrant community in general, maybe through the mosque if there is no NGO in the area. And find out what's needed. Second thing you can do without actually getting off your chair is to remember that refugees are not numbers. They're people. And each of them has his or her own story to tell, if they wish to. And each of them is also much more than a refugee. Being a refugee is just an experience and a stage in your life. But at the core, they are mothers, daughters, brothers, sons, doctors, engineers, cleaning ladies, cooks, construction workers, you name it. Okay, and once you remember their people, please remember also that just like we are subject to stress, especially now during times of the pandemics and the general upheaval of well, not knowing if I have a job tomorrow. The same applies to them.
I think this is really beautiful what you're saying, because I think we just got so used to just viewing people as statistics, and it's not even the problem with the refugee crisis itself, but in general, at just how we look at economics, how we look at well, politics as well, that these people are starting to turn into numbers. But speaking of generalizations, how do you deal with that? Well, loads of refugees come from very patriarchal cultures, and like I do imagine that it must be hard working as women with them sometimes. So how do you deal with that cultural difference? And do people seeking asylums always, you know, share these views or the stereotypes, and well, how that cultural kind of a crash, I suppose, looks like? Is it actually a problem?
It's pretty much individual. Yes, well, first of all, Poland is special in the sense that half of our asylum seekers are women and children. We have a lot of women who run away from Chechnya, from domestic violence. So there are single mothers, but also families. And it really, really varies. But by and large, first you teach by example. You expect men to do what refugee men to do what you would expect from your local male friends. You expect them to help, to carry heavy stuff, to help in the kitchen, or whatever. And on the other hand, you work with women to make them more, I don't like the word assertive. It's a sort of psychobabble, but more confident, have more conviction that they can stand on their own. And I must say that the situation the asylum seekers find themselves in when they arrive in Poland actually helps, because usually it's women first who can find any sort of job, even if it's cleaning, cooking, washing dishes, whatever. So they become providers for the family, and that sort of sets the whole system upside down. We also, of course, work with men as much as we can. I do have much better contact and much more contact with women, but where I can, I try to well, make suggestions, because see, this is a very, very thin line, right? On one hand, we want refugees to integrate into our society, and that means well, sharing our social standards. On the other hand, however, we cannot force them to do so, in the sense that you cannot impose your views on someone else. So it's a very thin line I'm walking when educating, so to speak, because I don't have the right to make those decisions for them, what to change, how to change. I can only, like I said, show an example, discuss, suggest, but I can't go and tell them, look, you're in Poland now, you have to do this and that. It's just not unthinkable.
Yes, like I think we just really need to learn to like balance everything out, because as you said, we are dealing with people and not numbers. So it's really important to understand these people and to understand their way of thinking, but also you've got this pressure of the society that they are beginning to live in, which has, well, a completely different idea of functioning as a family, for example. So I guess, well, especially in Europe, we just need to find a way to work it out in a really, well, the most efficient and most respectful way possible. So do you think you could pinpoint any countries or any communities that we could learn from in terms of working with asylum seekers?
Well, there are good practices everywhere where you look, but I've been recently taking a hard look at how local governments are handling integration. And well, the first example that comes to mind is the city of Barcelona in Spain, of course. The second is Grenoble in France. Grenoble decided that no matter where you were born, when you are here, you have citizens' rights to the extent the local government can grant them. And they've been working very hard at making this something obvious, which basically should be obvious, right? Your rights to well, your human rights, first of all, but also your rights to public services and so on shouldn't be differentiated based on where you were born. So Grenoble is quite successful in that, and I really envy them, because that's something I would love to see here in Poland.
Speaking of still governments and communities, we've got a question from the audience, and Margaret Owen is asking you, what do you want me to tell the UK government? I want to set up proxy grandparents for accompanied child asylum seekers, as well older people have more time and commitment. So what would you say to the UK government to deal with such ideas?
I would tell any government, UK or otherwise, that any idea that puts people in contact, the old-timers and the newcomers together, that makes them do things together, is the way to build a community. And the stronger community we build, the less problems we will have with cultural differences.
Thank you a lot. Just one thing to the audience, because I can see that you've already started asking questions, which, well, I'm really grateful for, and I'm really grateful that you would like to get involved. So the way we are going to do this is we are going to answer questions after each speaker finishes their interview and what they have to say, and we will go through these questions. Okay, thank you a lot, Natalia. It was really nice hearing from you, and I think well, I was reading on that subject, but hearing things from a person who does it every day, I guess does give a completely different perspective. And well, even if it was just 20 minutes, then I guess what you said was really powerful and really meaningful. So thank you a lot for that. And well, I'm going to give the virtual microphone over to Kaya, who is going to interview other guests.
Thank you for the virtual microphone. I'm Kaya from, as said before, Red Youth of the Polish Socialist Party, and I would like to interview our second guest right now. Please welcome Heval Tekosin one of the international volunteers of Rojava, affiliated with the University of Rojava, that is here today to tell us about genealogy, and that is the Kurdish approach to feminism, to women's liberation. And so, hello. I would like to start off by asking you to simply define genealogy in a few words so that our viewers are on the same page.
Yes, so I'm going to have to say that's not really possible. I can read from books and I can read what the Kurdish women have written that I've just asked about this, but genealogy is such a different paradigm that it's going to be very difficult to try and define it in a few words.
But we could say Kurdish way of combating patriarchy. Could we say it?
Yes, I mean it's called the science of women, and of course it's got a hell of a lot of herstory in it. This is obviously her history in it, and it's uncovering and telling a different history where women were very prominent in societies, and there were different forms of societies that capitalism, positivism, Marxism doesn't talk about. And you see that women have been written out of history, and so genealogy, the science of genealogy it's called, is trying to uncover that again and tell that story.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And also, I wanted to ask about the change that has the Kurdish society, the Rojavan society maybe, undergone in the recent years. For I believe that women have been mostly confined to the traditionally female roles. Well, of course, they were mostly mothers, mostly wives, but now they are joining the armed forces. Right now, they are leaders. And could you say something about the society's, about the change of society's view on the role of a woman?
Sure. So the revolution was in 2012. Kurdish society is a little bit different to what people may know about Middle Eastern society. So even in 2012, before the revolution, and certainly now, women walk around the city that I'm in European clothing. I mean, you couldn't tell the difference between Europe and here. And they walk around at night completely safe and by themselves as well. So, but Kurdish society was quite a lot more like that already. Now, in terms of responsibilities in Rojava, because in Rojava we talk about people having responsibilities, not having power. There's no rank, for example, in the army, there's no generals or colonels. There's people who have responsibilities for things and try to organize things. So it's all thought of in a different way. Now, when there is a position of responsibility, we have dual responsibility. So always there are two people and at least one must be a woman. So this is a way of using, let's say, positive discrimination to make sure the balance is redressed. Also in the security, which is very important, of course, because we're looking at a situation where many women are suffering in the home and other places, of course. And every police and justice system has a mixed group and then a women-only group parallel to it. And the women-only group parallel to it decides whether they deal with it or not. They have priority over the mixed group system. So if there is, for example, violence in a home and it needs to be solved, which of course it needs to be solved, then the women's parallel group can say, this is a matter that concerns women, we're taking control of it. and they can actually prosecute the man even if the victim doesn't want them to, which I think is quite important as well. Yes, there's an enormous amount of presence you see on the streets of women in the armed forces and in the police. In the areas that I work in, there are always women present. And if there aren't, people will start getting involved and making sure that's sorted out. So I'd like to give a bit of a story now, because it's so difficult to describe with all the theory, and I'm here, so I want to tell a few stories. So I'm within the revolution, and I'm within a revolution that says we must kill the dominant male. That's a sentence from Öcalan. Now, what that means, obviously, he doesn't mean we should start actually killing men who are dominant. What he means is the dominating ideas within us, we must struggle to stop them, and always look within ourselves and stop us trying to dominate things. And this is for everyone. And so what this means is that when I sit in meetings and when I'm working, the people around me are constantly doing this, and we're constantly reading and constantly aware of this need in the culture. So everybody is constantly trying not to be dominant. And so everyone's very, very sweet and friendly. It's an absolute pleasure to be inside this revolution. And I can only imagine the horror of what it must have been like in other revolutions that were, let's say, patriarchal or, dominating, had male ideas within them. It must have been very much worse. But I feel completely safe here in the middle of a revolution with these people. And because there isn't an authority structure as well, because we have to try to reduce our egos, then the ability to make decisions together, because no one's trying to dominate, is much better.
Well, that sounds amazing and also very subversive compared to the Western culture's need for power. And also, I wanted to ask. Of course, this is quite a new concept, genealogy. However, have there been any writers writing commentaries on the subject, preferably any women engaging with this theory?
Yes. I'm afraid I have only just started reading genealogy, so I haven't read too many books on it. I've read one book on it. It is the only thing that I'm going to be reading now, because I've realized just how important it is. I'd like to read a little bit from a genealogy book written by the Committee Genealogy here, if I may. I think it tries to describe the difference between genealogy and, say, European culture. So one of the words that happens a lot in genealogy, in Abdullah Öcalan's writing, in Methchild Exo's writing, in David Graeber's writing, is the word positivism. So I'd like to give the definition of positivism from the genealogy book now. So Abdullah Öcalan says positivism is the way that the patriarchy thinks. So it's their mentality, the male mentality, if you like. And there's a definition here. So it says, positivism pushed women out of the world of knowledge. Positivism has been shaped by facts. In other words, the truth is reduced to the factual results experienced in the observed laboratory. Clearly, this methodology has no connection with society. It deals with how society can be dominated, governed, or enslaved. Positivism does not constitute an idea according to social reality. It adapts society to its own reality and determines the needs of society. Consumer society, virtual society, visual society, etc., are the products of this understanding. Positivist epistemology is based on so-called objectivity. Positivism breaks down the whole subjective-objective reality and creates a dichotomy among them. The observer treats the observation in a mechanistic, robotic manner. However, the relationship between the observer and the observed is interactive. The observer has become an entity with its mindset, class, value judgments, preferences, and goals. In other words, the truth develops through the way we look at it. Now, I didn't understand that the first time I read it, and it's taken me a lot of reading to really kind of figure out what it's talking about. But I'd like to give an example of that now. So when I came here, unlike most foreign people who come here, I went straight into work. I didn't get any education, which is very not normal. I started working and living with Rojavan revolutionaries. And I got here and I thought it was a very conservative society. So I asked my responsible, look, I don't know the rules. I've not had any engagement. I don't know how to sit. I know there's rules about sitting. I know there's rules about things I must do when someone comes in, the clothes I wear, there's all these rules. And I don't want to make any cultural mistakes here. And he said, Heval Tekushin, there are no rules. There is only one rule, and that is that you must be everyone's friend. And in fact, after that, I realized that actually I could sit anyway. And I had to change my heart to be everyone's friend. And this is about genealogy, because positivism, the way the patriarchy thinks, it looks at the physical world and creates rules around it. Whereas here, the rules are moral. They're metaphysical rules. They're about emotions, the way you feel and who you are. And after a while, my heart changed, and I was becoming very, very excited about all the people I meet, all the strangers I meet. And they said that I had improved a lot with my attitude and how I'd changed. So I've been trying to get some statements from women here in Rojava.
Amazing.
And they turned up half an hour ago. And my Kurdish is terrible, so I've been struggling with a translator. I have got something though, unfortunately. Oh, the passwords come on. Yeah, you understand the situation here in Rojava.
Yeah, we do. It's all, but we're still happy to hear the statements.
So yeah, I've guessed the passwords anyway. So I'd like to read a statement. Sorry, I wanted to say at first, obviously I'm not a woman, which means that I have no emotional understanding of what it's like to be oppressed as a woman. I can read the theory, of course, but I'm never really going to have that actual understanding. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to get statements from women here, for the better understanding they would have of these things. And it's gone through a translator. I haven't read it, so I'm just going to read it for the first time now. So I hope it's survived that process of being translated. So this is someone who's been in the revolution for years, very, very well respected, and responsibilities here. And I'm very happy that she's given a statement. So she says, the aim is to get again to a right life, to a natural life, because the capitalist perspective and the male mentality increased in the last 7,000 years and is preventing a right and a natural life. Before 7,000 years, there was natural society, where the women were leading a free society. When the thoughts of free women become to form a society, the life is getting beautiful. For this, genealogy is both explaining the woman, because she hasn't been explained until now and is building up a free life. We, as Kurdish women, see the leader of the Kurdish people, Abdullah Öcalan, as our friend, because he knows that the woman is free life and that he is struggling in favor of that. We can't get to answer about the freedom of society and of women from inside the capitalist system, because the reasons for the problems is the capitalist system in the first place. Because of that, when we say women, we mean the woman's mentality, and we want to overcome the dominant male mentality. According to this system, when a woman can organize her own life economically, and when she can live like what is considered as the predominant culture in a place, that is considered freedom for her. But we say when the woman is thinking with the male mentality, that she is still oppressed. And if there is oppression in another country or at another place where women get murdered, then the woman is not free. Because in the woman mentality, there is no individualism. That is a characteristic of the dominant male mentality. Feudalism and capitalism is killing the woman every day. The woman herself can't be silent against this killing or live with it. For this struggle is important. For Poland, male oppressors want to make a decision and enforce it against women. That is a situation that is symbolic for the situation that the world is right now everywhere, that the world is in right now everywhere. Especially for the body of women, nobody else has the right to make such a decision except for the women themselves.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very happy we managed to get it. Only just got there. Yeah, she adds that she's not speaking, obviously, for all of Rojava. This is her opinion on the matter. One of the important things to understand about Rojava, which will touch on the rest of the questions, which is part of genealogy as well, is that it is heterogeneous here. That means that every village, every neighborhood, every town, and every city is doing something different. Even the way they elect people, make rules, organize their police, their mentality, it's all supposed to be different and developing different. So I get questions a lot of like, you know, what is the situation in Rojava? And from a materialist sense, it's very, very difficult to answer them because it's all different.
It's different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what I would say is actually it's extremely homogeneous in one way. And this is where all the genealogy work is happening. What I see and feel when I walk out my front door is that the culture is very homogeneous. Everyone is incredibly friendly. Friendship
Okay.
is...
I'm sorry, but we are gonna have to end slowly as the time is
Yes, we're
9.
slightly running out of time, but
Yeah, and there has been a question. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the chat. There has been a question from Kasia about the difference between Western feminism and genealogy, and I believe it has been more or less answered while chatting with you. So again, thank you very much, and thank you to the women that provided this statement for us women in Poland.
I'll thank them.
Okay, so I would like to move on to another guest that is here with us today, while staying on the topic of Rojava. So I would like everyone to welcome Hanna Bowman from a YPJ veteran, a former international volunteer, that is here today to talk with us on the topic of women's role in the fight with ISIS.
Hey everyone. First of all, I just want to say Havel Tekoshin for making me feel nostalgic for Rojava. It was so nice when I lived there. It was like, as you were saying, the idea, the mentality there is so much different from the West. The friendliest people, everybody seems on board there with the revolution too. So in other interviews I've said, when I was in Rojava, I never felt harassed or sexualized or discriminated against by the men. And then when I came back to Canada, I've been in Rojava for so long, I forgot how ingrained the patriarchy is here. And even though Canadians will tell you, no, no, we're much more, we're into feminism and we understand we're trying to treat people equally. We grow up in it, so we don't realize how much of society it's in here. It's like it's almost bred into the way we are. So when I came back from Rojava the second time, my guards had come down. So then when I was going out into life again, and these little, and they were just small incidences of, oppressive attitudes, I was just kind of like, I don't remember how to deal with this because I hadn't had to deal with it for so long in Rojava. It was interesting like that. So I miss that about Rojava.
Okay, well, of course, thank you for the statement. It really sounds like a beautiful place, and I would like to ask you, you've been to this place, you have joined the revolution, you've been in the revolution, but this is a very big decision to make. Leave your own life behind and leave the culture you grew up in and go overseas to join a revolution, to join a fight with an oppressive country or a state that wants to impose religious laws on people. And I would like to ask you to tell us more about the decision that you made to join.
When I decided to go, it was in 2014, and it wasn't so much to go for the revolution because I didn't know a whole lot about it then. I went for two reasons. One was, my disdain for ISIS. And two is because at that point in my life, I was kind of empty. I kind of felt like I needed to do something to contribute. I felt like I'd been sucking air up until that point, and I wanted to give back. I was born in Zambia, which is a very poor country, and my mother had the good sense to bring us to Canada when I was young. So I'm very grateful I grew up in a safe and good country. When people say they build lives out of nothing here, I'm like, no, you built lives out of opportunities here, where in other countries they don't even have that. Like countries like Rojava, the Middle East, especially where women are oppressed so much. In the Middle East, a woman's role is to have babies. That's essentially it, right? So there's a saying in the Middle East, and it's kind of a rude saying, but it's boys for pleasure, girls for babies. And when a woman gets married, it's usually an arranged marriage, and even in Kurdish society, they still do that. Not as much as in the Arab society, but in the Kurdish society, they still do that. And they have the man's babies, they have his babies, they take care of his house, and they become his property. And it's not uncommon that when we would turn down a side street in a village and you would see women hanging out on the sidewalk with their kids, but as soon as we turn the street, they run away into their homes and hide. So when I went there, I didn't know a whole lot about this. I knew a little bit about it, but when I went there and I started to live the model they've created, that's when I started to understand the revolution side of it more. And that's when I started to live it personally myself, and I continue to try and adhere to the qualities of the YPJ and the revolution here in Canada. So that's when I went there to fight ISIS and to join this incredible women's army that was actually fighting, and they weren't given some patronizing role like radio operators or something. They were actually fighting, and I wanted to do that. But after being there, I became more ingrained, more in love with the revolution side of it. So, and that's, like I said, I try and keep those same values today.
Mm-hmm. Well, and about to stay on the topic of women, as you said, they are really under a patriarchal culture that is oppressive to them. And could you say something about the women that decided to join the revolution to become the fighters? What were their stories? What did they go through?
They've gone through pretty much every scenario you can imagine. Some girls join because they are for the revolution. A lot of girls join because they're running away from an abusive home or forced marriage. Some of them join because they have no one else, right? They've been orphaned, all their family's been murdered and stuff like that. So it's every reason you can think of. when they join and they go through the academy, they go through the training and everything like that, and they learn to stand up for themselves. They learn to not rely on the men. There's actually rules that say if you need to fix something, you fix it yourself. You don't ask the men to do it. But the men are also told that if you need your place cleaned, you clean it yourself. You don't go ask the women for it, right? So it's interesting in that sense. The women join, I think, not same as me, not knowing the full extent of it, but when they join and they go through the training, they learn to stand up for themselves, to speak up for themselves. I've seen the girls come from 17-year-olds who ran away from an abusive, forced marriage. They join and they blossom, right? They're like little tiny wallflowers that are just afraid to say anything. And then 3 months later, they're out there yelling at the guys, go get that gun position, shoot that suicide truck and stuff like that. And this is like, wow, I can't believe this is the same girl, right? So it's what the Middle East needs right now, a women's army like that. I hear the question that you asked about Tekashina as well, about how Western feminists compare to what's happening in the Middle East. And I've been asked that question a lot. And I say, you can't really compare the two because the tactics change and it's not a competition. Besides, they're doing better, this is doing better. An armed group of women in, say, the West, in Canada or US or in Europe, would going around shooting abusive men would not last very long. That would be a terrorist organization. But then what do they call it? A slut march in the Middle East would not go over very well either. They would be oppressed right there on the street. There'd be a lot of violence. So the tactic has to change for the environment. The girls in the Middle East are leading that. The YPJ is leading that. The PKK version of the YPJ too, they're leading that. They're setting an example. Driving into towns that we just liberated and we're treated like heroes. It's it's an amazing feeling, and I'm so proud that I made the decision to go there and be a part of that.
It really sounds like a huge thing, like a revolution, of course. And while we are here to talk about different perspectives, different revolution, I also wanted to connect this something to to what's happening in Poland right now, to the fight for reproductive rights. And I wanted to ask you maybe about the reproductive rights in Rojava. For I know this is a community that is at war, and the resources are limited. However, how is the access to reproductive rights in Rojava, and what are the views on contraception and abortion?
Well, most of my time in Rojava was spent within the YPJ, and there are some rules in the YPJ and the YPG, and one of them is sex is very taboo, and that's in general in Middle East culture. The men and the women, the YPJ and the YPG, are essentially kept separate, except when it comes time to fight, right? We don't live together, we don't eat together, we may travel together, but when you're in your tabur, is like your unit, we mix when we're fighting, or if we're just having we're playing games or something like that, like they'll play hide and seek and stuff like that to kill time. So relations are frowned upon, as with any military. So I don't get a sense of the attitudes from within the YPJ or the YPG. In civil society, sex is there's still the ingrained taboo around it. It's not openly discussed. It's not on display in public. There's no such thing as holding hands, and public displays of affection are not very common. You're more likely to see two guys holding hands than you are to see a guy and a girl holding hands. So they're aware, they're not completely in the dark. When you get into the private part of their lives, they have access to protection, condoms, and the pill and stuff like that. But when they get pregnant, a lot of it is still seen as, this is a gift from Allah, you have to go through with it. They can get a medication that induces labors if they need to get an abortion, right? But that's done in secret. It's not something that they certainly don't go unless they have a very understanding father figure. They don't tell the fathers or the cousins, because more times than not they will get murdered, right? And the Kurds are less inclined to that. The Kurds are much more advanced, much more westernized in their mentalities. But like I said, in some instances they still do that, especially in the more remote areas. when I was in Iraq in 2017, I had to help a girl with this process. And it was one of the most brutal things I've ever had to do. Just the whole thing was just brutal. So it's there, they're aware of it, but it's very secretive, right? So it's not like here, they're not in a position where, I don't think they're in a position where they could probably have much influence over society just yet with attitudes towards this. Because it's still very much seen that the babies are the property of the men. Her job is to deliver that baby to the man, you know, so especially among the Arab tribes. So it's there, but it's done in secret.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very expensive process too. It could be easily over $1,000 US.
Well,
so
I can
that's a lot
imagine.
of money for them. When $25 in Syria and Rojava is considered a good monthly salary, you know, $1,000 is, it's, you know, so there's a lot of what I would say are back alley abortions, which are terrible.
Yeah, extremely dangerous, I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, so to maybe connect to the topic of the relations being taboo, I actually have a question that was meant for Heval Tekosin, but we finished already that section of the interview. But I wanted to ask about queer people. What are the attitudes toward people that are not cis, not straight in Rojava?
That's one of the great hypocrisies of the Middle East. That's also a taboo thing, but it's rampant. It's like I said earlier, girls for babies, boys for pleasure, right? The men, especially the men, it happens a little bit with the women, but it's more so the men. They have relations quite often. And the definition of gay is different here. And they've said this. They said it's not gay if you're not in love, and it's not gay if you're on top. So I've had the men tell me that, right? So it's a strange thing. They'll have relations and stuff like that, but it's not gay. It's not gay. So I think, you know, I've met Kurdish and Arab men who would be considered like flaming, but it's just not really openly talked about, even though everyone knows it's there. And there seems to be a level of acceptance. But like I said, as long as you're not making an issue of it there, that's the way it seems. And the Kurdish model is technically accepting of it. The revolutionary model is technically accepting of it. But because there's thousands of years of ingrained, you know, patriarchal masculinity and stuff like that, it's not something they can really put. Well, it's been a while since I've been there, but it's not something they can really discuss too much just yet. They have probably bigger issues right now, like with Turkey invading and stuff like that, right? So, I mean, there are, I think, and Heval Tekosin, if he's there now, he would have a better idea. It's been about 4 years since I've been in Rojava. There are, as far as I know, there are movements, and I know within some military groups, some militia groups there are movements within them to make it more acceptable and for people to come out. But you know, they have a lot of issues there. We're very naive in the West as to how much, how big the issues are there and what's being prioritized there, right? So, yeah, Tekosin would probably, if he's been there long enough, he would probably be a better answer that question better.
I see. Well, of course, the community at war, so I imagine they have to prioritize their issues, of course. Yeah. Well, could you say something about the change of cultures that you witnessed while coming to Rojava? Well, of course, Canada is a Western individualistic culture, and you came to a society that is very much based on community and mutual aid. And could you say something? Did you experience some sort of a cultural shock or something like that?
I was actually shocked at how much was similar, more than how much was different. There's some rules and things like that, like some cultural things, like Tekosin was saying, you know, what the way you sit and stuff like that. I was confused a lot about, is this a YPJ rule? Is this a Kurdish rule, or is this a Middle East rule? Because no, some rules cross all the way, through all three, and then some of them are very specific to each culture. Like when I was in the YPJ, we were told you don't cross your leg because having your leg crossed is a sign of superiority. You're showing the bottom of your foot to somebody. That's a Middle East thing though, right? So because the bottom of the shoe is supposed to be you're less than me, so therefore you're below my foot. So things like that. But I remember one day, me and some of the other international volunteers went to a little corner store. We walked a couple miles to this corner store, and we just bought some Pepsi and some chips, and we're sitting on the front porch of the corner store. And it's just a little tiny store, about the size of like one parking spot. And the owner brought out some chairs for us to sit, and we're just there eating our chips, drinking our Pepsi, and villagers would come by and say hi and discuss the weather and what's going on. And what did you hear about this guy over there? His sheep ran away and stuff like that. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is like the same thing I do back home in Canada. I go down to the coffee shop. People just kind of just hang out and tell stories and joke around and stuff. And that's when I realized like how much we have in common, right? So yeah, I wouldn't say most of the things that I found different were rules set up within the military, but that you would find that with any military. When you join a military, you give up certain rights, like your right to just wander off on your own and go do what you want to do. You have to stay within your group, you have to stay within your team and stuff like that. So, but otherwise I was like really, really impressed with how much alike we are. And that's the part I missed is like, there's, especially in Rojava, that like Tekashin was saying, they're so friendly there. It's mind blowing. Whereas when you go see the Kurds in Bashur, not so much, right? So it's a different mentality over there. They're much more westernized than Bashur, and they take all of our BS with them. So they're capitalist ideas there too. So
I see. And all of these ideas, well, a lot of them are very revolutionary, and this idea of destroying the dominance inside of you and the emphasis on the relations and on equality are all wonderful ideals. And while going back to Canada, have you tried implementing any of those ideals in your life, in your community that you live in right now?
Canada is, like I said earlier, is already pretty advanced along that way. I remember once in Rojava, one of the commanders was asking me, should we bring the revolution to Canada? And I was just like, no, not a violent revolution like that. I work in the film industry here, and the film industry is very proactive to be gender equal. But there's the old guard in the film industry, the people who've been in there for 20 years and they still have that older mentality, and they make inappropriate jokes and inappropriate actions sometimes. And right away, especially me, I'm just like, you know what, back in Rojava, I would have put a bullet in your leg for saying that. So that's about the extent of, bringing it here. Because most of the, and I say this in the documentary, is like the young people are the change. I kind of think that maybe at a certain age, older people shouldn't even be allowed to vote because they're not going to vote for change. They don't want to disrupt their routine. So, but the young people are the change. In the film industry, I see the young people are really on board with these new attitudes, this new gender equal and feminism and stuff like that. And even the guys are really on top of it, right? Oh, you can't say that. They'll go after the older guys who are making inappropriate comments. You can't say that, right? And they'll report them. They'll get them fired sometimes. So I really like that part. I haven't had too many times where I've had to get mad at somebody or to explain to somebody. It's like, you can't say that, you can't do that. I swear to God, if we were back in Rojava, I'd run you over with my truck. But, violence isn't always the answer. Not always.
I see. Yes, well, unfortunately, the time is coming to an end for this part of the interview. Thank you very much Thank you very much for coming, for chatting with us. And I would like to move on to our last guest that is here with us. I mean, Dominika Kasprowicz of the Women's Strike. Yes, welcome. and we would like to ask you some questions and maybe chat on the topic of the protests that are ongoing here in Poland.
Okay, hello, I'm ready. Would you like me to tell you my story first, or have you got any questions?
Yes, I would like to at first ask you about your story. What is your role in the women's strike, and yes, your story and the protests?
Well, I'm with the strike from the very beginning, from 2016, and right now I have just recently become a spokesperson for the strike, one of the 4 new people responsible for communicating with the media, with the press. We've got 3 top leaders, I would say, in Poland, 3 names that are recognizable to the general public. It's Marta Lempart, of course, which was the one who started the strike, the whole movement. And she is the leader, I would say. But we also have Klementyna Suchanow, which is a reporter and a journalist, and an author of the book that sums up the whole movement history. It's called This is War. So she's also the, I would say, the brains behind the whole operation. And there is Natalia Pancewicz, who is the chief coordinator of the strike. And I think these are the names that are recognizable to the general public in Poland. But we need many more people. We need more women, because these 3 are just overloaded with work and duties, and basically they need help. So we have just established the press corps, I would call it. And I'm just one of the new people, maybe not new to the strike, but new to the public. So this is me being here today is just the beginning for me to represent the whole organization. And my personal story is just like any other. I think it's nothing special. It's how all of us started with the strike, I think. In 2016, there were 9 protests in Poland organized by the left-wing Razem party, which I'm also a member of. And these strikes were held in some bigger towns and also cities. And there was one in Wrocław, and Marta Lempart was an activist who was invited to join the protest, and she was also giving a speech there. And she basically called all the women in Poland to join her on the 3rd of October in kind of a general strike that would take place in all Poland, in all the villages, in all the small towns, in the cities, just a nationwide strike. And well, Polish women reacted to her speech and they followed. So I was one of the thousands of women who followed. I basically answered the call. So there was nothing going on in my town, which is a small town of 33,000 people in northeastern Poland, in the Lake District. So I decided to go to Gdynia, which is at the seaside. My grandma lives there, and I was going to take her to the doctors that day. So I decided to go to Gdynia and join a big protest there. It was early in the afternoon, so I managed to move to Gdańsk, which is nearby. It's part of Tri-City. And I saw what was happening in the big towns, big cities. And then I was on my way back home to Iława, early evening, and I decided not to just get off the train and go straight to Warsaw to take part in the big gathering in the center of Warsaw, which I saw on the internet. And the protests in Gdynia and Gdańsk were smaller. It was a much smaller scale. And then I went to Warsaw, and then I felt that we had the power to change the country. And from that moment, I'm all about the strike. And this was the first wave of women taking to the streets and I think fighting for their rights since 1918, I think. And I was just so happy to be part of it, to be part of the revolution and the change. And after the very first rise up, there was the decline in the number of protests. And I think I was one of the ones that really believed in the idea of women's strike. So I stayed, I basically stayed. And then I kept on organizing protests in my town. I thought I can do it on my own. And if they say it's important that there are protests in every single town and village, I don't want to go to a big city anymore. I want to organize things, create an organizational committee in my town. And that's what I did. I basically called my friends and I asked them to join me, and they joined. And we started organizing protests in Iława. But then I was the only one of the group who actually kept in touch with the organization in all around Poland, with the girls from other towns and cities. And I kept organizing things that took place in other towns and cities. So I either stayed in my town and organized the protest in Iława, or I went to support some friends in other towns and cities. And with this second huge wave, because of course in between, during the 4 years, we organized many events in Poland. There were different actions, different topics, different themes. But this second rising, this second wave, I would say, that is taking place right now, it started a month ago, is something special. Again, it's about abortion and it's about banning the abortion. This is what made us go into streets, that made us strike, basically. And again, this is the cause of women and all the people in general taking to the streets. I think that the organization, because it is an organization, even if we don't call it an organization, is getting bigger and bigger. And right now we are in this process of change, because at first our policy was your area, your rules. So there was this, I wouldn't call it headquarters in Wrocław, but there was Marta, there was Natalia, there was Klementyna, and some more activists connected with this free, and they were kind of a help desk, I would call it. They were helping others organize protests. They were the leaders of the strike, but they never wanted this organization to be, I don't know, they never wanted a hierarchy, that someone is the leader, someone gives orders, and the rest of us just follow. They wanted to be a grassroots initiative. They wanted people to take control in their towns, in their communities. So they were basically a help desk, enablers, but they never wanted to be in command. That's how I see this. That's how I see this. And right now we need to change a bit, because this idea is becoming more and more outdated. Of course, there are rumors circulating that this is going to be a political party soon. Nothing. No, it's not true. It's not true. We never wanted to be a political party, and we are not going to turn into a political party anytime soon. But we need to think about how to help women and other people who support the strike organize better. And we need to find a model that is not based on a party model. We need to find something different to help us organize, because there are so many people right now taking part in protests who don't know how to how to deal with police repressive measures, how to deal with organizational problems, who are new to the strike, new to the whole let's go into the streets thing, that we need much more workforce to help deal with the problems, and we need to delegate some of the duties. We need more help. We need more people who are permanent in strike. It's basically all hands on deck right now. It's rising, so it's normal. It's typical for this kind of things. But we need to turn into a proper organization to be more effective. So that's what's happening right now with this advisory board, also called the Consultative Council, and the consultative committees, experts, boards. This is our first attempt to organize into something that is not going to be a political party, but definitely something that has never happened before in Poland, maybe except for the solidarity movement. So we need structure, we need some model to follow. And I'm going to be part of it because I have spent 4 years organizing protests in my town and helping others organize protests in their towns and cities. And basically this has become my life and my mission, and I feel the duty. So right now I'm doing whatever I can. I'm giving my all to the organization. Okay, ask me a question, because I'm a teacher, so I can go on for 45 minutes, talking about nothing and everything.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. Definitely, it's very nice to hear that even though sometimes the protests are losing the intensity, the power, there's still things to do and to organize, as you did between the first and the second wave of protests.
Yes.
Yes, and
we have never stopped. We have never stopped. Just we can see the difference between the first wave and now the current wave, that in between less people were interested, and this time it's like the national rising again. So after the first rising, of course, we also had some achievements, because we had some of our members run in elections. So we've got MPs right now. There are women who represent the strike in the Polish parliament in the Sejm. So we have become a political power, I would say. We've got many supporters in the left-wing parties, and they are active in the streets too, because they are always there when we are protesting. They are trying to help us, to help the people who are, for example, held by the police. So they give us their all. So I think we've got some political power to change things through the people who support us in the Sejm and also in the Senate.
Yes, that's great to actually have that representation in the legislative structures. I agree, that's an important thing. And you now have demands, a full list of demands that are to do with women's rights. And of course, all of them are very important, but I would like to ask, which ones are you personally most proud of?
Well, I'm particularly invested in the education. So because I've been a teacher for 15 years, and I'm also an educational freak, I would say, because I'm advocating for free schools, democratic schools, and all the alternative schools in Poland. And that's my main field of interest. But what I think is the most important field, of course, one would argue that none of these is more important than the other, but I would say that secular state is the one that I'm the most proud of, and I believe that the Catholic Church in Poland is the source of all things evil in the country. And until we get rid of the Catholic Church driving all the political changes in the country, driving changes in education in the country, until we basically get rid of religion in the state matters, there won't be any progress in civil rights, there won't be any progress in women's rights. So this is the very first thing to do, because the ruling party, Law and Justice, is basically a tool in the hands of the church, of the Catholic Church and the Polish Episcopate Conference in Poland. So we need to take care of this and try to send them where they belong, in the church, in the churches, but not in politics. And yeah, I'm going to be working for this committee. I am not an expert, but I'm one of the church's public enemies. So I'm going to support this particular committee. In terms of organization, we've got 13 fields of interest, because there are issues in 13 fields, major 13 fields, and secular state is my top priority. Of course, education and women's rights. I'm also on the anti-fascists committee, but not as an expert, only as a supporter. And we've got groups of experts in every single field, and they are working right now on the demands and ways how to carry out our policies after we win the fight in the streets. Because we, of course, we hope we win the fight in the streets, and then we have to be ready to follow with some pragmatic approach. So we've got these boards of experts, but we also have these supplementary, I would say, committees of people who basically fight in the streets for activists. And whatever the expert boards come up with, we have to make sure that this is not only theory, that this is actually doable. You know, we need to have these checks and balances implemented, because experts are experts and sometimes they are talking heads. Of course, we have just invited people we wanted to cooperate with to join us, but you know, experts tend to be experts, and sometimes they get stuck in books, in theories, in university, I don't know, ideas, theoretical ideas, and we need people who are rooted in the reality to somehow check and balance the experts. And of course, there was some unrest. That's the right word. When we published the very first draft of the list of names for the advisory board, you know, there is this activist bubble, like in every country. There is this activist bubble, and the bubble was uneasy with the list. Some names were basically, I'm struggling for the good PR words. Some names were basically creating some outrage, but the leaders of the strike have chosen the names and the people carefully, and basically we stick to the names, we stick to the people, because these are the people that we could always count on. Basically, these are the people who always helped us. So this was the first draft. This was the list of names of the people who were available on the spot, who were ready to come to the headquarters in Warsaw and share with the public. And there was also a dispute whether to publish the name of the list of the names or not, or basically wait for some people to join from the other activist groups, from different NGOs, from organizations that operate in Poland. But the top leaders of the strike decided that, well, the momentum is important. So we want people to know that we are working on something that is really important, that even if the riots and the protests in the street are getting smaller and smaller, it doesn't mean that we are, scaling back. We're just regrouping. We are starting something new. That advisory board was something new. We never wanted to have anything like that in the past, but then we decided that it's a good idea to have this advisory board. And they decided to publish the list of names. The very first experts who agreed to join us, the very first group of activists who decided to join us. And I think that they never thought that this would stir so much trouble. And yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to stop you
Yeah,
right here
of course.
as we are nearing the end, unfortunately.
Yes, of course.
I have one question from a fellow teacher here that is saying hello to you as a colleague, and wanted to ask you about the appointment of the Minister of Education, Mr. Czarnek, and how do you feel about him? And do you feel like there is a climate of fear of repressions at schools?
I quit my job in June, at the end of the school year, because I thought that I can no longer be part of this system. And I decided to basically give up my teaching career. And I've got many friends who work at schools, different schools in different parts of Poland. And yes, they can feel the oppression. Also students, my old students, my own children have been repressed because they had the lightning symbol somewhere on Facebook, on social media displayed. It's happening, and I could feel it in Iława because we had like 90% of young people in the streets at the beginning of the protests of the new wave a month ago. And then suddenly there was this announcement that students and teachers who take part in strikes, in protests, will be punished. And suddenly we had 0 teenagers in the streets. So I could feel it, that suddenly something has changed. The climate has changed. And even if the young people wanted to take part in the protest, their parents basically didn't let them. They didn't allow them to go into the streets anymore because they were afraid of their academical progress and academical career, in the school. They didn't want them to face any punishment, basically. And of course, we are collecting data on the people being punished, the teachers who are being repressed, who have measures taken against them, also students who are being harassed and have trouble at school because of the strike. We have no numbers to tell you. I have no numbers to give you right now, but we are collecting data every single day. There are some new complaints, and we've got some new inquiries how to deal with repressive measures from the headmasters and headmistresses of the school, how to deal with teachers who somehow punish the students for taking part in protests. We are trying to help every single person who gets in contact with us. We have issued some guidelines, some leaflets with help, but of course we need to take care of every single incident. We need to find out the details and work out the solution to problems like that. But in general, I know that this is like, it is a very difficult situation, and not many teachers can afford to basically quit their work, quit the job, leave school, because they are ashamed of the way of, they are ashamed of the Minister of Education, they are ashamed of the system, they are ashamed of what's happening in the Polish schools. Well, I couldn't afford it in financial terms, but I have this freedom as a person who has already been repressed and has already suffered in the local community for being an organizer of the strike, of the protests. I have nothing left to lose, so I decided, okay, I can be an idealist. I know I can manage to find a decent job somewhere, out of education. I'm still young, so I can basically change my whole life in the name of the revolution. But there are many teachers who cannot afford that. They basically cannot quit the job. They have to stay at school. And it's not possible for all of us to basically just quit one day. Most of my friends who support the strike, support the protesters, they are afraid to go into the streets again, and they hide their logos from Facebook. They have to make sure they are safe to keep their jobs. And I can understand that. And I know that it's my privilege that I could just quit and devote my life to the women's strike. So yeah, if that answers your question. And of course, I think that this prime minister, not the prime minister, but the minister of education is a person who is just, well, I'm ashamed of him. And I think that all the teachers that I know are ashamed of him. And the students are ashamed of him. Even my daughter, which is 10 years old, she knows that this is something to be ashamed of, that this person is basically responsible for education in this country. Such people shouldn't be in offices in general, shouldn't be accepted on the political saloons. Yeah, I am ashamed of the teachers who have to, I'm ashamed of the teachers who think it's a good person for the job. And I am really empathetic towards the people who have to just keep their heads down to not to lose their jobs. That's it. Okay.
Thank you. Actually, when speaking about the repressions that are directed towards the teachers, they are. I can speak from experience because I've been one of the people organizing a solidarity demonstration with one of the teachers that has been that is facing these repressions, and he was he's being put in front of a disciplinary committee just for advocating for safety on the protests, not even encouraging attending the protests. So to answer also the question of the person that asked it, it's really bad. And there was also a question for all of the guests about the books. it's a question from Avi Fliplis Hadar,
Mhm.
and they're asking whether the books that have been mentioned in this webinar could be listed for the viewers. So if you could maybe list them in a chat, we could
Sure.
publish it later on the events page so that everyone can go back to it and learn as we learned.
I'm not sure if they have started translating it into English, but right now it's been published in Poland last year, so it's a brand new book. It's that thick, so I think it's going to take some time to translate it into English, but I think it should be published abroad because it's such an important movement and people want to know the story from an insider's point of view. And Clementina is just basically a great writer. She's a great journalist. She's not only an activist, but she's also a professional. So everything is well documented in the book. And I think it's one of the most important books that have been published in the last 5 years in Poland. This is a book that changes the view of the strike and shows how important it is, which is sometimes something that the general public has not grasped yet, I think. The importance of the strike. Right now, it's being compared to the first solidarity movement. And sometimes even people compare Marta Lempart to Lech Wałęsa, but I think that the general public hasn't grasped the importance of the strike yet and the significance of the protests in Poland. That's due to coverage in the media. You know, we've got the national media that are basically an organ of the ruling party. So there's propaganda in the media. There's no information, no more information in the media. But also the private-run companies, media companies, do not really offer much coverage of the strikes. So last night I watched the Suffragette movie with my daughter, and there was the same problem. That there had to be bodies, there had to be people sacrificing their lives for the media to start reporting on the events. And I thought about it last night, that do we really need to have casualties? Do we really need people to die in the streets for the media to wake up and start paying attention to what the strike is doing, to the revolution that is happening in the streets? And I'm not a pessimist, I'm an optimist. So I think, no, they are going to wake up. There are some private-run media companies who, of course, show the strike. They are always, the journalists, the reporters are always there on the ground. But I have this idea that I have this feeling that there is always something more important than the strike. It's never number one until someone dies. So I hope this will never happen. But we need more objective media coverage. That's for sure.
Yes, definitely. And to maybe move on to another question, we have another question actually for Natalia. So Natalia, are you with us still? There is somebody's asking, Andrew Garnietz, shouldn't we aim not only to integrate refugees with our societies, but have mechanisms to integrate us with them, to ensure that our system and the society is as open and flexible as possible?
Oh, but of course, integration by definition is a two-way street. Meaning it cannot happen without the active participation of the hosting society. We expect from the newcomers to adjust, but we have to adjust as well. It has to be a fair trade, otherwise it will never work.
Yes, thank you. And also another one for you also, Natalia.
Okay.
And the person Kuba, person's name is Kuba, and this person is asking whether you said about the push for securization of the borders and migration in the EU, and he's curious how to fight against it, especially when the EU is seen as a guardian of human rights, and could it protect us from our own governments?
It's not a zero-sum game. Meaning that EU or its respective institutions, European Commission in this case, is not a saint or a devil. It's an institution, it's a system. You can work with it, you can try to change it from within, you can fight against it. The options are limitless. But it doesn't really mean that if they stand up for LGBT plus rights, we can't make them stand up for refugees' rights as well. It's not mutually exclusive. It's hard to see it in the terms of moral aspects, so to speak. It's just an institution. It's a system. As to details, how to fight against securitization. Well, yeah, I wish I had a good answer. Because that's something I've been trying to well, not just many organizations here in Poland have been trying to tackle with when pushbacks starting to happen at our own borders. And we still haven't found a good way to prevent it. Some organizations took the legal pathway, challenging the decisions and in one court and the other court, and then the Supreme Court, and then the European Court of Human Rights, and winning. And the problem is that, of course, it solves the problem for the specific person, but it doesn't solve the problem for the system as such. The Ministry of Interior, which is supervising the border guards, and is widely believed to be the author of the pushback policy. Keeps saying that this is an individual case; it's not a systemic problem. So I presume it would be the same for the EU, where they now they're in a huge uproar about what's been happening in Croatia, what's been happening in Greece. But it's the same Greece that has been a few months back prized by Ursula von der Leyen for being the Europe's Aegis, Europe's shield against migrants, against refugees. You need to call them on that. You need to keep reminding them that security is not everything. Security can't be a fetish. And it's also not a magic solution, to put it in real terms. It won't stop people from coming, because as long as the situation they are running from is worse, what can happen to them on the way or here in Europe, they will be coming. So the way to go is to figure out how to manage migration, how to help people integrate with respect and dignity. And the respect and dignity are the two words I would highly recommend to Emmanuel Macron today, in the context of his policy against Muslim residents or citizens of France. Solving social problems by force never worked, never will. And this is something you need to just keep hammering at the institution until I get it. At least that's the way I see it. Of course, there are as many ways to fight the system as there are to fight for any other cause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. And also Kuba is asking where can he read about the pushbacks at our border?
Um, I will pass. I will post shortly in comments links to a few reports on the pushbacks. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. We are unfortunately nearing the end of our conference of Women's Revolution, The Way to Freedom conference. I would like to again thank all of you for coming. Um, we learned really a lot today about the situation of those looking for an asylum, about the different ways, different approaches to feminism and to women's liberation, about how important the relations and the oh, sorry. We have one thing more. This is a statement from women from Congrastar, and it's here. It's a statement from them, and we would like to play it, present it to our viewers. So now we are to watch the Congrastar video. We are very sorry about the sound of the video. I'm sure we can at least read the subtitles, but we are very sorry about the lack of sound. We're working on it. Something's wrong. Yeah, sorry about that. Unfortunately, the sound did not transfer to the Zoom, but we will link the statement later in the event, so everybody can watch it. Again, deeply sorry about that. And back to what we were saying. we learned really a lot today about the way we can organize, about the importance of mutual aid and cooperation, about the Polish women's strike and the importance of it and the character of it. And we've learned also that there is, even though the protests are in some cities losing the power they had initially, there's still things to do. There's still stuff to organize. We can still fight together for the liberation of women. I would like to kindly thank each and every one of our guests. Thank you for being here today with us. Thank you for speaking with us. I would like to thank our viewers. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to what we had to say. And also the other hosts of the conference, the Radio for Rojava and the Polonia Express. And we were your hosts, your interviewers, Kaja Stempin and Adrianna Radłowska of the youth organization of Polish Socialist Party. Thank you once again. Let's support each other in this fight for our rights. And as women each day shout on the streets in Poland, you will never walk alone. Nigdy nie będziesz szła sama. Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you.